Time for our weekending strategy session with political commentator Jerry Nichols coming to us from downtown Toronto. In Regina, we have Sally Hauser, an associate principal with Navigator, and with me in the studio is political commentator Sarah Bain. Jerry, let's start with you. We're still frantically combing over these new documents and listening to the recording a couple of times over and over again. From what you've seen and heard, just give me, what's your initial reaction to this?
Well, my initial reaction, Glenn, is that this tape, the audio tape that we've heard, reinforces and strengthens the narrative that this scandal has had from day one. And that narrative is this: Jody Wilson-Raybould is a hero, Justin Trudeau is a villain. Okay, that's the narrative. This makes it stronger because you have Wilson-Raybould saying, "Oh, I think this is we shouldn't be doing this. This is unethical. This is political interference." And then you have Wernick basically saying, Trudeau's in a bad mood. You better get this done or he's going to find a way to do it, right? Trudeau comes across something like a crime lord or something like that. So, yeah, I think that this is going to be really bad news for Trudeau. It's going to keep the story going, and it's going to hurt the Liberals.
Jerry, does this change the narrative that we've kind of been looking at over the past week, that there were other reasons why Jody Wilson-Raybould might have been moved out of the Attorney General position? Some of these other cases that she was involved in, this case of the wrongfully convicted person. Looks like here that she's from the recording anyway, she's completely on Team Trudeau, and she's actually playing defense, warning Wernick that, hey, we're trying to protect the Prime Minister here. This could be bad.
Yeah, that's to my point, that she looks heroic. She looks like a good soldier. She looks like she's trying to do what's right. And what's her reward for that? Well, she gets demoted from her cabinet position, presumably so that the Prime Minister can bring in somebody who will be more pliable to his demands. So, yeah, again, this is going to help Wilson-Raybould standing with the public. This is going to hurt Trudeau standing with the public. So, and worst of all, this is going to give fodder for the media to talk about from now till Easter. So if the Liberals think this scandal is going away, sorry, it ain't.
Sally, I mistakenly said you were in Regina. You're actually in Edmonton today. But how does this change the story from what we've just heard so far?
Well, I don't know that it so much changes it as bringing us back to square one, and how really the Liberals could have killed this in a week if they'd come out and said, that's right, we are pressuring. This is, of great importance to Quebec and great national importance. These jobs were on the line. So we were very, very strong, and thinking that this was the right thing to do. And then this tape wouldn't have mattered in the same way. The way they've managed this, from repeated and kind of ham-fisted attempts to try to smear Jody Wilson-Raybould's reputation, as well as a very senior judge in Manitoba, and all in sundry in between over the course of 2 months we're at now. So I think this really does show, in the first week, all those many moons ago when we were first talking about this, it was kind of like, what's the definition of pressure? And maybe she misinterpreted it. I think what the tape shows is that, yeah, this was very clear and definite, that this was top-down pressure and we need you to make the right decision. But if the Liberals had come out and owned that in a way in the first week, it wouldn't have been a great story for them, but we wouldn't be here talking about it 2 months later.
Right. Sarah, it's one thing to hear Jody Wilson-Raybould testify at committee and talk about what she recalls from these conversations, and her recollection seemed to be fairly precise. At that point, we didn't know she had audio recordings backing her up. But how does it change the public perception of this when you can actually hear somebody's voice, Michael Wernick's voice, the tone of his voice, the back and forth of the conversation, and the things that she is saying to him? Does it make it more damaging to the party now than it was back when we were in the days after her testimony?
I think it makes zero difference. I don't think that anything that we've heard today will change anyone's mind about how they felt a day ago, a week ago, a month ago about this situation. Jody Wilson-Raybould has said herself that she has nothing more to say on this. She said it in these documents. I mean, as you said, we're all starting to just look through them. she confirms but does not change or give any new light on any of the information that she's already provided. So my opinion hasn't changed. Jerry's opinion hasn't changed. Sally's opinion hasn't changed. Where we were a couple of days ago is the same as where we are today. What it has done, which is what Sally said, is that it simply gives yet another day where the media, where Canadians will read this on the front page of the Globe and Mail, where they'll be reading it, hearing about it on CTV. It gives the story one more day. And that is, I agree with Sally, a problem for the government because they do want to move on from this.
But you've heard at least part of the recordings that we played earlier on the show. I don't know if you heard the entire 17-minute phone call.
I've heard the parts that you have been airing on CTV.
Yeah, and Mr. Wernick seems very forceful in that. He is not holding back. He's being very clear. Did you hear anything in that, though, that raised to the level of what she is alleged to be were veiled threats?
Again, I would have said the same thing a week ago. I think that the clerk has said that he did indicate through words and through stats and facts that this was a huge concern, that this was something that we needed to continue to consider, that we couldn't make a rush decision on this. The tone that an individual uses and the words that they use are now for the public to hear, but that doesn't change what the clerk had already said. I did say how important this was. I did say that this was important to not only a region of the country, but to all of us. When jobs are lost, it's important to all of us. What your tone and what words you use, well, at least now.
But it does matter, though, because the line between discussion and inappropriate interference. That is a subjective line, and surely the tone of the conversation, the flow of the conversation, the words that are said back and forth must inform that subjective call.
Agreed. And I hear nothing different in this call, the recording, than I felt, as I said, yesterday and any other day.
Right.
I don't. My opinion of it hasn't changed. But those who were already in disagreement with the government will continue to be in disagreement with the government. Those who were on the side of Jody Wilson-Raybould will continue to be on her side. This recording does not, I don't believe, change anyone's mind about how they feel.
Well, go beyond the political partisans who have all chosen sides, as you said. What about other people who are not following this as closely and they hear this phone call? How do they react?
I think that they will feel the same way, as I've said, as they did before, because the information that they have is the same.
Jerry, you agree with that?
No, I disagree, and I disagree with Sarah that my opinion hasn't changed. A couple of days ago, I didn't think this situation could get any worse for the Liberals, and it has gotten worse for the Liberals. I think your average person just listening to this on the television, the radio, they're going to think, man, he's bullying her. And Trudeau's bullying her, and she's just trying to do her job. So again, it reinforces that narrative among the public. And we're seeing from polling numbers that this is hurting Trudeau. His numbers are bleeding. This isn't going to help. It's probably going to hurt him.
Yeah, Sally, talk to me about the form that we're getting this covertly recorded conversation that even Jody Wilson-Raybould admits was inappropriate, but she felt it was necessary. What do you think of that, about cabinet ministers recording clerks of the Privy Council secretly? I mean, it kind of reminds me of, it almost seems Nixonian at a certain level, and it's kind of ironic because Jody Wilson-Raybould herself in testimony evoked the Saturday Night Massacre at Nixon's Justice Department in 1973. So are we really at this level that cabinet ministers feel they have to record these phone calls?
Well, I think, and this is where there does, appear to be more damage being done. Not only does the kind of image of Trudeau and, sending his proxies out to kind of bully and cajole really kind of speak and to damaging the very heart of his brand. But also what it speaks to, and this is maybe a little more inside baseball, that it's clear that there are problems within the cabinet, within the caucus. I think we've seen that throughout this whole affair. I think, there was some knowledge of it in advance of it, but they've got a caucus management problem. If there's this level of kind of feeling of mistrust and having to, frankly, protect, cover your own behind, you've got to bring a recorder in that, the problems run deeper even than this kind of terrible media story. They seem to have kind of internally, fundamentally a problem, and this certainly isn't helping.
Sarah, you were here on the Hill long enough. You probably remember the dying days of the Paul Martin government when a Conservative MP secretly recorded Prime Minister Martin's chief of staff, Tim Murphy, about an upcoming confidence vote. Have you ever seen anything like this before? These kinds of secret recordings being made, and more to the point, what does that tell you about the nature of trust between cabinet ministers and the people in the Prime Minister's office or the Privy Council office?
Well, first, I'd say I think that's a question for Jody Wilson-Raybould to answer. I have been, as you said, on the Hill for some time and have many, many times had conversations recorded and many times recorded conversations. And there's just a little sentence you put at the beginning of that recording. I'm about to record this conversation for either my records so that I can go back on them. I might use this to publish it. I may use it to promote something. But there's a tiny sentence at the beginning, which is, I'm doing this. Do I have your permission? And that was lacking in this conversation.
Okay, Jerry. Last word to you. What do you guys do next? What's Andrew Scheer's next move on this?
I don't think Andrew Scheer has to do anything. I mean, it's just to stand by and watch the SS Trudeau, sink on its own. I think he just has to, stick to his message and have a positive message and remind Canadians that, hey, you know what? Trudeau's not who you thought he was. Time for a change.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Sarah, Sally, and Jerry, thank you very much for coming in and talking to us about this and processing the information very quickly.